And the next part of the pasuk reads, "V'lo yachlu litma'ameh." Right. So he says, right. Had the pasuk been explaining why they did not let it rise, we could have read it did not have time to become chametz because they were being driven out. However, now that the pasuk is only saying that they did not have a chance to make it because they were driven out before they could do it, then the words "and they could not delay" seem extra. So he says, "V'lo dai ki gorshu miMitzrayim," and the verse. The pasuk says not only because they were being driven out of Mitzrayim, it says the Shechina was in a rush. Hashem didn't want them to stay in Tumah anymore. Right? That's kind of follows in line with the 49 levels of Tumah. They had to go right away, kind of thing. Although although Bnei Israel want to make their matzot and complete the whole matzah and complete the whole element of making all the nitzotzot out before they can leave, Hashem said, no, we don't have time to wait. I got to get you out of here. Right? So Hashem said, did not want them to stay in Tumah Mitzrayim anymore. Now we have the last part of the pasuk. Right, he's going to get to that right now. So he says, according to the Pshat of pasuk, they had planned to prepare chametz as right for they wanted to make sandwiches for the way. Right, that's according to the pshat of the pasuk, they wanted to make sandwiches. Right, but they were rushed out and before they had a chance to finish making the food. Right, so the end of the verse, did they have time to make tzeidah? Right, gam tzeidah, they didn't have time to make food. Right, but according to the above approach, they would have had these matzahs even if they had not been rushed out. Right. Okay, so and even if they had prepared their food beforehand, they were careful not to eat chametz. What happens? Then the end of the pasuk mean when they said they didn't have time to make these seidah l'derech. So he says, "V'gam seidah lo asu lahem, shelo lakchu miMitzrayim ha'ma'achal hatzarich lahem." They did not take any food other than the basic provisions to take. They didn't want to take anything. Mipnei shehu ma'achal gufani v'tamei. Anything that they take out besides the basic, bread, flour, and water would have carried with it tumah. Right? Only those matzah cakes that they brought out of Mitzrayim as dough. That food was free of the tumah of Mitzrayim. He speak on the derech nes ad chetzi iyar until the half of iyar. What happens in the half of iyar? Because now they have to start eating. Now they have the problem. Now they ran out of food. They've run out of provisions. Right? If I only take flour and water out of Mitzrayim, at some point that's going to run out. So now they're derech nes. So he says, "V'tamu bahem." So he says, what do we know? What happens when we in the Parshat Haman? It says, so it's bread from Hashem. It's not lechem min haaretz, lechem min hashamayim. So he says that the man, that these ugot matzot had the tam of man. It's a special, unique flavor. Anyway, so what he's saying here is that the Bnei Israel didn't want to take more than they needed to take out of Mitzrayim. They took out their flour, they took out some water, that's it. They didn't want to take any food that would carry with it because that flour and water that they were making, these ugot matzot, were already, they had completed the kedusha already. It was not any more tumah.
I would have taken a leftover from the korban.
Yeah, exactly. Leftover meat. Now he says, back to our original question. The original question is, why does the Baal Haggadah say, V'lo yachlu litmah me'ah? That's not true.
The Torah says, V'lo yachlu.
But the Torah says they couldn't eat it, but the mitzvah of eating matzah comes well before the mitzvah of eating matzah on Pesach.
They ate it with the Pesach.
Right. So, right.
Oh, so you're saying
why? I have a question. I have the original. Why does the Baal Haggadah say? Why do we eat matzah? We eat matzah because we didn't have time to let the dough rise. That's not true. Because we have a mitzvah with the korban. So say that. That's fine. That's okay. That's a good reason. But don't say don't tell me when I'm growing up in kindergarten. We were all in kindergarten. We all say we didn't have time to. Right. Exactly. Exactly. Spoiler. Right. Lachen amar Tana. Matzah zu shanochlim al shuma. Why do we eat this matzah? As we said, halo adayin anu bagalut. V'chutz la'aretz. We are still in it, right? He says we have to eat. The Baal Haggadah says we have to eat matzah. Why? Because we ran out of time. That's the classic answer, right? But it seems out of place that we should be eating matzah at all. Why? We said before that matzah represents lechem oni and lechem of shiabud, right? And then he says But but we are still in the land of Galut. We're really not under the ideal scenario of living on Tachat HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Right? Dahainu ba'aretz, in his land. We're not in his land yet. Right? So he says, Bishlama avotenu necha shenistavu lechal matzah ho'il v'shit tchila lahem hagula mi ba'erev k'mo shekatuv le'el b'samuch al pasuk ashir yelachem. Right? Aval anu she'oshvim begalut ve'en anu shum siman lekaruva geula b'amotei rabim lama banu lanu tzivu lechol matzah. He says, we can understand why Bnei Israel had the mitzvah to do it, because they could taste the gula. The gula was there. They got it. But for us, we're still stuck in Galus land. Even us who live in Eretz Yisrael, and we have the zchut to live in Eretz Yisrael, we're still under Galut, no question asked, right? Okay, we don't have the Beit HaMikdash, we don't have the ideal scenario of living under Hashem's Shechina in the ideal scenario. He says we shouldn't be eating it. Lama ba'lanu hatzivui lachol matzah. Why do we have a commandment to eat matzah at all?
But the tzivui was for when we were here with.
So he's going to, right, so he says, with Teretz, the Balag.
Right now we're in Galut, but it's like saying tzivui korbanot, right? Like.
Right, so he says, right, the Haggadah is questioning why that mitzvah applies to us while we're still in Galut. That's what he's asking. Matzah seems like, according to what we've just explained, matzah seems to be reserved for this, the reshut of Hashem. We're not under the reshut of Hashem yet. So if matzah is like this ideal food that we're supposed to eat when we're tachat kanfei Shechina, the real ideal scenario, if we're not in that situation, why do I have to eat, pardon me, cardboard on matzah on Pesach if I'm still in Galut, right? I should be eating, right? So he says, very good answer. I like it a lot. He says, Lezecher kavanah tova shekivnu Yisrael b'Mitzrayim. He says, why do we eat matzah? It's not because of the Galut. It's not only. Yes, the ideal scenario would be to be living under Hashem's Shechina, in the ideal scenario with the Beit HaMikdash and everything. He says, but rather our matzah is to remind us the kavanah tova of Bnei Israel at the time of Mitzrayim. Even though they were still in Mitzrayim, Shaloi speak, and their dough did not have time to become chametz because it would have become chametz had there been more time, but they didn't have enough time. Right? So, and remember what we said. They made the matzah dafka in chametz land, and because their kavanah was, we're so eager to become part of under Hashem's Shechina and under Hashem's domain that we want to do it. And since we are so eager to do it, so Hashem says that kavanah, we want to remind us with that kavanah. And therefore we too eat matzot while we're still in Galut. We're mekabel ol malchut shamayim on this day, before we even reach being under Hashem's Shechina yet. In other words, we're saying just like Bnei Israel did, they did it even before they were actually out of Mitzrayim. They accepted Hashem's ol malchut shamayim before. So to us who are still in Galut, we're accepting Hashem's matzah ideal scenario, even so, and he says, in fact, the opposite. He said the very zchut of eating this matzah and accepting Hashem's ol malchut shamayim while we're still in Galut, we're asking Hashem, make the gula come faster. Because we want Hashem. Right? By us saying we want to do something early, below, we're saying, Hashem, we're going to wake something up early. We're testing it. So that's the first part of this drush. We're going to take a 2-minute break.